don't generate precision. In which laboratory that random accidents generated the next generation of your technological tools, whether your watch, your phones, your computers, your aeroplanes, your fast cars, none of them cannot generate things like that.
Part of this argument is that you believe that God exists, who's incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent, he just exists uncaused.
No, that's not my argument. My argument is something different.
He's the designer.
No, my argument is, if you look at this universe...
The designer.
You see...
The designer doesn't need a designer.
Okay. Is your question...
Why should the universe?
Sure. Is your question meaningful?
Yes.
Okay. So, let me ask you a similar question. Who is the father of Santa Claus?
He invented Claus. Santa Claus.
Okay. So if I ask a question like who's the father of Santa Claus when Santa Claus doesn't exist, the question is not meaningful. If you don't believe God exists, then ask who created God. It's not a meaningful question.
It's a philosophical question.
No, it's not a meaningful question from your side.
It's a logical question because you all want to believe there's a creator who's incredibly powerful, incredibly intelligent, just exists uncaused. At the same time, you claim the universe, which is far simpler, cannot exist uncaused. That's a
I was only... it's not. I'll tell you in
a contradiction.
Allow me to explain why.
One thing to exist uncaused, to God, but not the universe.
No, allow me to explain. If you are going to ask a question, the question that you should ask should be meaningful to you.
It is.
Good. Do you believe in a God?
No.
Okay. So, asking who created this God that doesn't exist is a meaningful question.
I'm pointing the logic of God is flawed. No. The logical arguments for a God are flawed. That's why I don't believe in God.
Please,
because
listen.
The logic for God is flawed.
Excuse me.
It's a logical argument for God, and it's flawed.
I want to understand whether the question you ask is meaningful to you.
It is.
Right. So you don't believe in a God that exists, right? Right. So if you then ask, who created this God that doesn't exist? How am I supposed to answer? Tell me.
You're supposed to give me some way.
Wait. So let me answer the question. You asked, who created the God that doesn't exist?
You were talking to her about the universe. So basically, the universe needs to design. You said the universe
allow
needs to design.
Allow me to answer your question.
You won't say that God needs to design.
Can I answer your question?
So your question is illogical. Your logic is illogical.
No, please. Can I answer your question? Okay. Who created the God that doesn't exist?
Nobody. It doesn't exist.
I'm answering your question. Why are you not allowing me, giving me the chance? So your question is this: who created God that doesn't exist? Now, to me, a question, if you're going to ask me, has to have some meaning. It must have potential answers. It must, allow me to finish, and it must be free from contradictions.
Yes.
Any question, to be a question, must have two essential properties. One of them is, it must be free from contradiction.
Yeah.
It must have potential answers. If it doesn't have potential answers, it's not a question. It's a rhetorical statement. Okay. So let's see whether your question has those two potential answers or criteria, whether it's free from any defects. Who created the creator that doesn't exist? Now, this question is defective because it is asking me to answer about something that doesn't exist that was a creator of. So it's a contradiction within itself. How? Allow me to finish. Who created God that doesn't exist? If something doesn't exist, the question is, asking who created it is actually meaningless because that thing doesn't exist. You cannot ask who created that doesn't exist. So your question is defective. It's not a question at all.
I was saying that the universe needs to design.
No, listen.
God needs to design.
If you're going to ask a question, I would expect you asking me.
God does not need to be a designer. The universe does not need a designer. That's my question. That's my point.
My friend,
do you agree? God can exist uncaused,
do you agree? Your question is meaningless.
Can exist uncaused.
Do you agree? Your question is meaningless to you?
No, it's perfectly meaningful.
Okay. So imagine now I ask you a question. Who is the father of something that doesn't exist?
Nothing.
No one? Okay, so I answered the same way. God was not created by anyone.
Yes, he was.
Good, so let me continue now. I'll answer the answer. God was is uncreated. That's what we claim anyway. God is uncreated and has to be uncreated. So let me...
The universe has to be created.
Excuse me, please.
Which is
I've answered... Look, I've answered your question.
No, you have not. Because you avoid the contradiction. You avoid the point.
Okay.
If God can
May I
exist
ask
uncaused,
everyone else
the universe
here,
can exist
did I
uncaused.
answer his question?
Yes, you did.
No, you did not.
Contradicting yourself.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
No,
I
you're
said,
not. Perfectly logical points.
I used, brother, I used,
Against her, God has to exist.
excuse me, allow me to finish. Allow me to finish.
It's by saying
I
the universe
answered,
is a creator.
I answered
But the universe doesn't.
exact same way that you answered. So I actually borrowed the answer from you.
No, you did not.
I did.
Conversation started because I'm agnostic. He's not trying to convince me. I'm learning. There's no
Yes, but I'm
argument.
pointing out a logical contradiction here. He's trying to say that the universe needs a designer. And I'm saying if God can exist without a designer, the universe can exist without a designer. That's the
The
point.
reality is,
He's
the
trying to
reality
avoid this.
is,
He's avoiding the question.
the reality is, the universe is not self-conscious.
So what?
I only opened my mouth and haven't finished my sentence yet. Okay?
Yeah, so what?
You see, if you let me finish, then you understand why. Do you understand? Good. So, the universe is not believed by atheists, scientists, humanists, secularists, or agnostic to be something that possesses consciousness, self-awareness, intelligence, will, yeah, 4 qualities. They don't believe any of that. So the universe doesn't have a brain of any kind. Because we say brain to someone like a biological system, which thinks and organizes and plans and reflects and so on, right? So when we say about awareness, it's something that is making you aware that you're in existence, that you have knowledge of yourself and your surroundings. Okay, so the universe doesn't have any of that. It doesn't even know that it exists. It doesn't have this awareness that it exists. Neither it has the will to do something because it doesn't know that it exists. It can't do anything. It doesn't have the power to do anything. So this universe doesn't have any of these things for it to do anything because it's simple.
Quantum physics makes things happen.
Willingly.
This universe
It just does.
this universe doesn't have
It's like a
this
rock.
universe doesn't have a will.
It doesn't need one.
Because it doesn't have a
It's human,
will,
It needs a will.
so it cannot do anything by
it can.
itself.
It does.
Why
It
does it need a
does.
will to do something?
Things just happen.
When the universe does something, does it know what it's doing? Does it know? So it does things
A lot
not
of
knowing.
birds falling.
Let's understand, brother. Just understand one thing. Universe does certain things. Does it know it's doing it?
No,
It's not. So how do you know universe is doing it?
it is doing it. You can see it.
No. Just is. It's not an explanation.
You can see it doing it. Yes, it can.
No. Just is. It's not an explanation. If I say like my proof that God exists is He exists. It just is. Would you accept that as an explanation, a proof? Would you? Right. So I am not going to accept your it just is as a proof or an explanation. So now tell me, please kindly,
You can see the
why
universe
do you
is
say the universe is doing things that you claim it does?
quantum physics.
Sorry?
You understand quantum physics. Quantum physics explains it all.
Quantum
explains
physics.
Why
So
everything
I have to now assume you understand quantum physics, right?
happens. Reasonably well.
Good.
Well enough.
Okay.
Well enough.
If some things are not in existence, very important, I want you to focus on it. If some things like particles, virtual particles, like not particles, subatomic particles, or even if you break down, gluons, hadrons, leptons, sorry for the jargons, right? Okay, these are very, very tiny. Okay, we're talking about in terms of quarks and so on. My knowledge of subatomic particles,
Basically forces.
excuse me, please,
Basically.
it's not very good because I am not a physicist, okay? But one can read about it if they want to. So, if those things were non-existent in the first place, non-existent means they did not exist at all. Can they pop into existence while they were non-existent?
If there's energy there about, yes. I think can. Virtual particles can pop into existence temporarily.
Sorry?
Very quickly.
So if they're non-existent, meaning they did not exist, you know what that means? Let me tell you what is a non-existence, an example of a non-existence. Do you know what this rock dream of?
What?
What does this rock dream of?
Doesn't have to do with anything exists.
Nothing. This rock dreams of nothing. That nothing we know is a non-existent thing. This rock dreams of something that doesn't exist because rocks don't dream. So that nothing, imagine it was nothing like that to begin with. Non-existence, nothing. Can this nothing bring itself into existence and become all these quantum particles?
Apparently it takes it here.
I'm saying, can it?
Yeah, that's the
According to your physics and quantum physics.
Apparently it can. It's here.
Brother, one moment, please.
No.
If something...
No.
It can because we're here, which means we believe in God.
No, it's a problem with God. Because
Listen.
if you think God exists, you're saying that something does exist.
Excuse me.
God is a something.
I want to I want you to focus on this point.
I understand the question. I understand it fine. And I think about this one. Because the problem is,
Can I have your answer
we
again?
don't know how the universe came into being. We don't know that.
That's not my question.
This
Don't
is.
create a straw man argument. Logical
don't know- we
fallacy.
don't know
You see,
how it came to
people's
be, but-
comfort zone is creating straw man arguments and saying,
No.
you know what? And soon
What
I
we
can
do-
guarantee he'll move into evolution because that's another comfort zone.
No.
What I asked you, with all due respect, is something like this: if something is non-existent, it doesn't exist at all. It's absolutely nothing, absolute nothingness. Can this absolute nothingness then do something or become something?
No, it can't. It's here. Must be
How? Tell me now through
We don't
the.
know how.
No, tell
No.
me. Listen.
The universe
Well,
can
this is the
exist.
point
but
of
Excuse me.
God does exist.
Listen.
This is the point of God. No, this is
Tell-
the point of God.
God
because
tell
doesn't
me,
work.
brother,
we
please.
don't know
God's
how,
work.
and you're saying exactly the same about
Tell
our
me
universe
from your knowledge of
came to
quantum
No,
physics
what you're saying
how non-existent can become existence,
because special particles do.
and it develops things even better, progressively better. It plants. That's what you believe. You
once it
believe.
begins,
Hang on.
that's what
You
feels
no.
first.
You believe this universe does all these things and does things. You call this universe Mother God, nature, because nature doesn't demand from you to worship the Creator. That's why you take the two options. Who am I? Listen. Who am I going to take? God, who says, "Be kind, be just, don't deceive, don't lie, don't be selfish, don't utilize usury, and don't gamble, don't rape, don't watch pornography." And Mother Nature doesn't say any of that. You'd go for Mother Nature because Mother Nature is with you and your interest and your feelings and your desires.
Are you serious?
But yes,
want
I
to
make
live
that
forever.
claim.
I want to go to paradise.
Listen.
I want to live forever.
So let me.
Nature tells me I'm going to die. Boom, dead.
Listen. This universe.
I want to believe I'm going to live forever.
Listen.
Do not tell me I'm against
Okay,
God.
let me ask you the same question.
I'm against God. It doesn't
What would convince
work.
you? What would convince you that there is a creator of this universe?
Well, if, and this has not happened, if there were thousands of prophets over the world in the past, and they all speak the same message, that would convince me.
What would
But they do
convince you
not.
now?
Nothing, because it's too late. It's too late.
Okay. So basically now we've found an individual like yourself,
It's too late.
a thinking individual. He says, the thing that will convince me that there's a creator, there is nothing to convince.
Yeah, it's too late now.
Remember what I said? There are people who are not, and they're reluctant to engage with any evidence. If there are compelling evidence that there is a creator, would you believe?
Okay, yeah, sure. Yes.
You just contradicted yourself.
No, I did not.
You said there is nothing that can convince
I can't
me.
think of anything.
Listen,
that convinces me.
listen.
Different thing.
You said there is nothing that can convince you, and compelling evidence can convince you. Which one is the truth? Because they are contradictory.
I will-
Which one?
I don't know what the
They are
evidence is.
contradictory
I can't think of
statements.
anything at the moment.
Can you make a statement which is not contradictory? Nothing can convince me. Compelling evidence can convince me. Which one?
You haven't given me any compelling evidence.
No. You made two statements.
Which one? Choose one.
Brother, you made two contradictory statements in one breath, almost. Nothing can convince me. Compelling evidence can convince me. Which one?
I'll go for the compelling evidence. but
Right.
if you
So
tried
that means
I've
wait,
thought about it. I've
wait.
read all the evidence I've found,
Please listen,
and nothing's convinced me.
Please listen.
I've never found any compelling evidence.
my friend. So you have to say, it's not nothing that will convince me. Something can convince me.
Okay, let's try it.
Good.
So
So
I'll stop with to the evidence. I can't find anything.
wait.
That's why I say nothing.
Slowly.
It's too
So
late.
tell me what that something
I
that
don't
will.
know what it is.
So
You
how
tell
can
me.
we give it to you? If you have no idea what
Told
there's
you
something.
what would have convinced me.
No. Today, now.
In the past.
No,
it's too
today,
late.
now.
It's too late.
So
We
you're
know
now.
too much now. We see too much now.
So now you're saying again, today, there can be compelling evidence, but I don't know what that is.
Because it's all.
You need to help yourself so that we can help you. You cannot. You see, you cannot.
We know too much about science.
Listen.
About diseases, about religions, about people, about what fools people. We know too much. Fooled by
So,
He's searching for something. He says he's going to die. You want to go to
brother,
paradise?
please, without any commentaries, you believe there is something that can convince you.
I've seen it.
There is something, right?
Maybe there is something in it.
Not maybe, there is, because you said it cannot be nothing. You have to take one or the other. So there is something that can convince you, if it's compelling.
I've never found anything that will convince me.
No, it's not what you found.
And I've looked.
No.
I've looked.
My friend, you're not listening
Too late.
attentively. In principle, there can be something that can convince you if it's compelling.
In theory, yes. But
Good,
no
in
idea
theory.
what it is.
Good. So what I would now request you is this. I have known you for many years in this park. Yeah, many years. I would like you to kindly go and sit down in your own
I've
time.
done that.
Listen,
I've done that.
listen,
I've read the
listen,
Bible, I've read the
listen.
Quran twice.
You don't know what I'm demanding or requesting,
I've
rather.
thought about God.
Listen to him.
You see?
I didn't think about God since I was
No,
7 years old.
you're not listening to what I'm going to say.
I've been
I am,
studying evidence of God since
I am-
I was 7.
listen, I am simply saying, because in principle you accept, there can be something that can convince you if it's compelling to accept as a creator. I would like you to spend some time to find out what that thing can be, so that when you ask of us, we can give it to you. Yep. So now let's move on. Thank you. So this is your homework. This is your homework. So as I was saying,
I've done that. I've been doing it
no,
since I was 7
you
years
haven't.
old.
You haven't done it. You have to do it now.
I've been thinking about it since I was 7 years old, and I haven't found it yet. It's not stopped there.
Okay. What were the things that
You can't think of anything.
Okay.
You
What?
can't think
Wait. Because from year 7, or when you were 7 years old to your age today, you have looked for things that might be compelling.
Yes.
Give me a few examples that you thought could have been compelling, but it wasn't.
Okay, right. If you want. If we're all over the world, the prophets,
That's
all
past.
over the world.
Today. Not the
Exactly, that's
past.
the
Today.
problem.
No. Give me the things that you
why I
searched
don't
that
believe
from today,
it didn't work
when you were
then.
7-year-old, or 8, or 25, or 40, that the moment that you're reflecting, if this thing was presented to you, you would be compelled to accept. Don't talk about the past which you cannot change. So what were the examples that you thought about?
I can't think of anything today.
So
Because
basically-
everything today is going to be full, full people, the flaws of the human brain.
So you haven't really thought about anything like that?
Yes, we have.
No.
We have thought about
So
it.
listen, my friend, I am simply asking you for a very simple thing.
And I can't
Homework.
give it to you.
Listen,
I've done that.
No,
I've told you I've been doing it since I was 7 years old.
Listen, you're not
That's
listening.
no point me doing it further. I've been doing it all my life.
What I want.
All my life
Okay,
I've
let's
been
see.
doing it.
Let's see if my sister in humanity understands what I'm saying. I am saying, do not demand on you. Things will be compelling that in the past, if it was like that, then I would believe. You can't change the past. So you cannot.
Exactly, that's why I don't.
Let me
If it
finish.
failed in the past,
Let me
it
finish.
fails now.
You should not put forth a criteria that you cannot use because you cannot change the past. If you
I
had
know
the,
that. I know all that.
can you let me finish?
But today we have communication.
Can you let me
all
finish,
sorts
right?
of
Can you let me
things.
finish?
Nothing works anymore.
Perhaps you'd understand where I'm coming from.
I know where you're coming from.
You cannot put forth a criteria of acceptability. Yeah? If it's a good
You can't give
criteria.
me a single thing to believe in.
You know,
You can't do
subhanallah,
it.
meaning,
All you're
praise
doing
be
is
to Allah,
spouting
glorified be He.
It's simple. You
Listen,
can't
listen,
think
listen.
of anything that will convince me. You
My
cannot
friend,
think of anything.
try to understand.
I can't think of anything.
If-
You can't think of anything.
If, for example, I want to know that this camera is made by Canon or not,
Yeah.
I cannot put forward a criteria and say, you know what, if all the cameras in the world were made by Canon, I would believe it's by Canon. But I know all the cameras in the world were not made by Canon. I cannot make a criteria which is totally invalid.
Yes, that's right.
I have to set forth a criteria which I can test. Having fun. If I'm going to use a method, this method must be testable, verifiable. the method that you are putting forth for your acceptability of a creator is something that you cannot test or assess or verify. You're saying the only method that would have convinced me is the method of history, but you cannot go back in history. So it is a method that you have put forth willingly, knowing that no one can use this method. Yeah? So you have now what we call self-deceit. Brother, please. You have put forward a self-deceiving argument that knowing that you cannot traverse the historical past, so demanding if the past was like that, then I would believe is a self-deceit. It's a deceiving argument to your own self.
It's a flaw. I know too much about the world today to know how it can be fooled. So if it says, say, a voice appeared in the sky, God appeared in the sky and spoke to me.
Yeah. Would you believe?
How would I know that wasn't delusion?
Did you not say
How would
that?
I know that wasn't delusion?
Did you not say that earlier
How
on?
do I know that wasn't...
You see, he's clever enough to say that he was not going to demand that, because he knows that now, if I said, what about God comes to you and speaks to you, I'm God, he will say, magic, I'm deluded, it's a delusion. So
Do we know?
what would convince you
I
is
don't
something
know.
that
You can't tell me.
that
You can't think of anything.
you-
I can't think of anything. You can't think of anything.
so because
Against her, that God exists.
He's not trying to convince me.
Of course he is. It's the whole
No.
point.
I'm learning from him.
That's the
He's
same
learning
thing.
from him because he cannot convince you. Just,
My point is,
It's
the
over,
argument
isn't
to
it?
God fails.
he cannot convince you.
Information that you research it. That's the difference. Not just
Yes.
listen to it and reject it. You have to process.
I haven't given you arguments for God yet. I'm simply saying, when we examine this, thank you, when we examine this universe, there are a lot of things that we can
They're bad arguments. I know the arguments. I've heard
extrapolate from it, make inference of, by studying this universe. Like the gravity that we examined, that we don't see gravity,
There's something good you
we
see.
don't hear it, we don't feel it, we don't touch it, we don't sense it. The only thing that we see the effects of it. So from the effects, we accept the existence of a gravitational force
Because you walk in
or
there,
something,
you grab an
gravity.
image.
This universe also demonstrates
tells me
from the workings of this universe that it's an effect of
It's not nonsense.
a cause
It's not nonsense.
that has put this universe
Have a
into
brain.
place.
Have a brain.
So this is not an argument for God, it's simply saying, look at this universe and you make inferences. If you say this universe has self-created itself, that's one argument. That means at one point the universe was non-existent and then it created itself. Again, this is an argument which is totally invalid. Why? If you're non-existent to begin with, you cannot create yourself.
Well, no, in that time period, the Israelites considered anyone who wasn't versed in scripture to be unlettered, in order that, in regards to the fact that they couldn't understand what God had given them, or that Israelite nation, right? So would you say that it's true that unlettered really meant, instead of not being able to read or write, because you mentioned about human beings and their ability to add or take away, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala being free from that. So even if you do use hadith, you see in the hadith literature how the Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was in a certain treaty to sign off, but the enemy didn't want him to have Rasulullah written on the treaty, right? So Ali, he told Ali to, right? And there was a whole interaction which I'm sure you're aware of. So he obviously could read and write, because that treaty, as that hadith shows, that he was evidently aware of what was written and told Ali not to, well, to sign it anyway. So he can't mean then unlettered that he can't read or write in what we understand it, but rather in what the Israelites understood it, that he wasn't versed in scripture. And so the magnanimity of the Quran comes out in that, because it tells you tales of the Israelite nation which he shouldn't and he couldn't have known, because he wasn't versed in scripture, and so that there wasn't any translations at that time. And so it is a miracle in that he wasn't versed in scripture, and yet he still brought out the tales and the stories and the lessons from the Israelite nation.
Okay, my brother, thank you for making some interesting points. So from this speech I can hear that he's a Muslim and he has certain differences. If we go by the collective consensus of the Muslim, generation after generation after generation today, it's a consensus the Prophet ﷺ was unlettered, he didn't know how to read or write. Okay? The example that you quoted in support of you, even if you go into the hadith, not even if, Because you know very clearly in the hadith, it's quite clear the Prophet were unlettered. So you, my brother, with all respect to you, you try to bring a hadith which may support you, and let's analyze this hadith. This is a hadith about they're making a treaty, and the treaty would start like this. Okay, this is from Muhammad, Rasulullah, the Prophet of God, and the people that he was making treaty with, they said, no, how can we accept that? We don't accept you as a Prophet of God, Messenger of God, so we can't accept that statement in the treaty. Otherwise we do not need for a treaty, we would believe in you in the first place. So after some agreement and settlement, the Prophet agreed to say, I would get this removed, this clause that Muhammad is the Messenger of Allah. So what did the Prophet said? The Prophet didn't just say, okay, may I? There you go. Oh, you've written it there. Rub it, let me write it. You know what he said? Show me where you have written Muhammad Rasulullah. It was already written, show me where. So the Prophet had to ask, show me where. So he was shown me here, and then he had to wipe it. Does this sound to you like someone who knows how to read and write? When somebody says, like if I had to ask, you know what, imagine this was all in Chinese, and the word is here, and I asked you, can you show me where it's written? And you put it there, and okay, and I rub it off. It demonstrates from this hadith the opposite that what you're trying to prove, brother, that the Prophet ﷺ did not know how to read and write. In fact, he had to ask to show where exactly this was written, so that can be wiped off and rewritten. So we believe he was unlettered, with all respect, my brother. Yeah, he was unlettered, and when he brought the Quran came in a language that totally numbed and shocked the Arabs at that time, who were best and like masters of art and literature and poetry in that time. Knowing that the Prophet never learned or uttered poetry, and the Quran came in a language that totally silenced them, because it was so eloquent, but yet it came in a form that made them unable to bring something like it. If you can borrow my umbrella. It's all right. And you hold to her, okay? I've got a cup, she hasn't, okay? If I write poetry and I'm the masters of it, and you claim to have written a poetry, I can assess his poetry and say, okay, let me try it, because I am very good. I can imitate it. The poets all realize this is something unimitable. So there is an argument from the Quran called the inimitability of the Quran, that you cannot imitate the Quran in the way it is presented, in the way it is recited, in the way it's written. The actual Quran, which is the recitation, you cannot imitate it. The form, you cannot imitate it. Let alone the meaning and the eloquence that is embedded within it, but you cannot imitate the structure of the Quran. So many people have tried over centuries, who thought they would outsmart the Quran and falsify it, and they fail. So even if you go to today to these scholars who are not Muslims in Harvard, in Cambridge, in Oxford, and so on, ask them, what's so special about this Quran? Academic studies have done to demonstrate now, by someone who he's a professor, to make it, totally objective, how to actually falsify the Quran, because a test has to be demonstratively and repeatable, right? Something that you can assess. Otherwise, how can I even prove it false? So demonstrated that this is how the structure of the Quran is. If you are able to produce something like it, then go ahead. Let me give you an example. The Quran says in one of the very beginning, first chapter, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praises and gratitude belongs to God, the Lord of all that exist, all the worlds. Doesn't sound anything interesting. But to an Arab then, it was like, whoa, how can that be? They knew the concepts only, like there is only one world, Alam. And now this person is saying, Rabbul Alameen, Lord of all the worlds. Totally new concept. How can I even think of bringing something like it? Alhamd. They always speak their praises with definitive article, the praise and their gratitude, never at the beginning of a sentence. In the middle. This construction in the beginning of a sentence. So he's going against the convention of the poetry and their structure and bringing something like it, yet it is meaningful, yet is eloquent, yet is precise. This is one verse from the very beginning. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. A verse that begins with what we call the sifa, the na'at and man, like descriptive titles. They don't do that in Arabic poetry. You say, He is, but there is no such thing as He is most gracious, most merciful. We're talking about comparing Arabic poetries. Totally outside norms. How can they bring something like it? They don't even know what comes next. Malik Yawmiddin. Look, verse, ayah after ayah, ayah after ayah, verse after verse. Master, owner of the day of judgment. What? What kind of talk is this? You cannot be a master of time. You cannot be master of a second. You cannot be master of a day or an hour. You can be master of an umbrella, a house, a car, a land. You cannot be master of time. They had no such concepts whatsoever. It's inimaginable in their vocabulary that you can be master of a day of judgment. And it goes on like this. I just give you 3 examples to illustrate the form of the Quran. So when the Quran came to them to say, okay, bring something like it, they couldn't. Some of the best poems is لَيْسَ هَذَا كَلَامُ الْبَشَرِ. This is not the speech of a human being. So the Arabic of the Quran from a man who is unlettered was an evidence against them that this is not from anyone other than God. Okay? The people recognized him. So this is one falsification test. The other falsification test I gave you about contradictions and discrepancies. You will see the internet is full of attempts. Something like, people make claims in Speakerscorner, Quran is free from any contradictions, and no one's bothered to check that. Search on the internet. So many different websites saying, 111 contradictions here and there. It used to be my hobby in a way to go through each one of them, one by one, until I could find something that is very challenging. So I found a 1 or 2 that required Arabic language, and I said, is that what it is? Then I thought, okay, you know what? This website, which has the longest list of alleged contradictions of the Quran, they have translated this side in Arabic. You would find all of them in Arabic there, right? None of them are there. Only something else. Why? If you cannot produce like this in Arabic, you can do that in English. That tells contradictions, and in the next time we can go through each one, because you will be surprised how the Quran, every single one of them can be shown that they are not contradictions. Prophecies, likewise. Scientific mistakes. Earlier on I was talking to someone, very emotional Christian friends from, not friends, friends in humanity of course, I haven't known them, talking about why it convinced her away from Islam because there are scientific mistakes in the Quran. After going through the examples, she didn't even realize this is how easily you can reconcile, because it's not even a contradiction at all. Because she just heard the critic saying the Quran has a mistake in there, and she took that criticism as that's it, not knowing what's the response to that criticism. If only she found the response, she would have said, okay, it's not very weak. So when Muslims in their zeal and passion, they say Bible is full of contradiction, right? Did all of them go and look for response by the Christians and saying contradictions cleared? You should have done that, how they respond. And if you find they failed after all of these different attempts by different scholars throughout 2,000 years, then you can say that that one remains a contradiction. And there are views. There are still views that is unresolved. They cannot resolve it. So we can say, yes, there are contradictions within this book, but others can be easily explained away, which I would have no problem in accepting it. There is not a contradiction. It's a contradiction in a translation maybe. But the fact remains, there are discrepancies which cannot be resolved. Okay? From the scholars' own mouth, they admit that. Some people say, God hasn't guided me. That's not the case. Allah tells us in the Quran, He has given you, shown you the guidance, whether you're grateful or ungrateful. Inna hadaynahu sabila imma shakiran wa imma kafura. He has guided you, whether you are grateful or ungrateful. Just want to show you. In Surat, this only has you see English translation. I'm finding it difficult to find it. Insan? No. This is man. Surat Al-Insan. Which number? Just want to show you so that when we understand how the justice is interwoven within the whole of the Quranic fabric. Noah, Jinn, Zammil. Yeah, this is the same one, sorry. Just read it already. We guided him to the right path, whether he was grateful or not. Those people who don't worship God, they are not grateful to him. But Allah says in the Quran, we guided him regardless whether he's grateful or not. He constantly shows the guidance. Constantly. Because he is just. If he doesn't give you the guidance, where is he going to come from? Who's going to guide you? Tom, Dick and Harry like me and you and people like that? We don't know anything. Tom, Dick and Harry, that's what we are. God is the one who's going to guide us, all of us, whether we are grateful or ungrateful. Whether you're a believer or unbeliever, he guides us. So when we look at the message of the Quran to us, we find that the Quran tells us in a way that we should be really reflecting. Sometimes the Quran speaks of, oh who you believe, Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, oh who you believe. And the Quran gives you injunctions and rules and regulations. Other times the Quran says, Ya ahl al-kitab, oh people of the book, and then interacts with them. But other times, interestingly, the Quran says, Ya ayyuhan nas, oh mankind. Oh, that's interesting. It's not specific to the Muslims or to the people of the book who are Jews and Christians. It's general for every human being. What are those address? Ya ayyuhan nas. Look. Interesting why the Quran addresses like this. I would like to get a Quran translation with the Arabic itself, much easier. This is a modern translation. It says, people. It starts with people. The command, all people. Ya ayyuhan nas. Be mindful of your Lord, who created you from a single soul, and from it created its mate, and from the pair of them spread countless men and women far and wide. Be mindful of God, in whose name you make request of one another. Beware of severing the ties of kinship, and continues. Be mindful of the Lord who created you. So God is addressing every human being. Be mindful of Him, the one who created you. Who created you? Mother Nature? No. God who created you is addressing you in general. Oh people. Ya ayyuhan nas, wa'budu rabbakum alladhi khalaqakum. Walladhina min qablikum la'allakum tattaqun. Created you and created those before you, so that you may be God conscious. The Quran, in one place, says a very interesting parable. It says, oh people, listen. Here is a parable set forth. Those who ascribe partners to God, their state is like this. Okay, they are not even able to create a fly, and even if the fly were to snatch it away from them, they won't able to retrieve it. How weak is the one who seeks and the one what is sought? Okay. Do you know the ayah in the Quran? Yeah, it says like this. There's a parable like this set forth. We'll quickly search this, and I want to you to focus on this. It's very, very interesting to me. So I'd like to share that with you if you don't mind, right? So this is Istami'un. Yeah. Surat Al-Hajj 73. Okay, I've got a translation here. O people, a parable is set forth. Therefore listen to it. Surely those whom you call besides Allah cannot create fly, though they should all gather for it. And should they fly snatch away anything from them, they could not take it back from it. Weak are the invoker and the invoked, the one who seeks and what is sought. You know what's so interesting about this? It's only recently that we have grasped another level of meaning. Quran is saying those who associate partners with God, they can't create a fly. Scientists today, can they create a fly? No. But many people believe they can, right? You'll be surprised. But that's not the point though. The point continues. Even if that fly were to snatch something away from it, you won't be able to retrieve it. Why not? I can catch the fly and get it. We have, fly catching agents. But do you know the amazing thing? How does the fly retrieve and snatch thing away? The fly says the food, right? If you give your food and the fly eats the food, do you know what it does? With its proboscis, with its like a long tongue, just like you've seen the frogs, yeah? Very long tongue. And then it spits on the food. The food, with the acid, the enzyme that it's there, it digested partly already. The food is digested before it goes, and then it takes it in. So even if you were to stop it from there, the food is already taken. It's digested. You can't retrieve it. Can you unfry an egg? You can't. So how did we know this? With recent knowledge and discovery of studying insects and flies and all these animals, how they get their own food, how they have their food. Now we know through the proboscis they spit something. And when you look at it, examine it under a microscope, we see how the food is transformed. It's being digested. Very difficult to see, if not unable to see with the naked eye. Recent knowledge. So the Quran is addressing us, people, think and reflect. This is a parable. You become so proud and arrogant that you think no one created you and associate someone else like Mother Nature, who created all of this. You can't even create a fly. Neither can Mother Nature, right? Even if the fly were to snatch it away, you can't even retrieve it. Look how weak you are and what you're seeking. You can't retrieve it. So this should be a reminder of us that, we are a creation of God. So for you to reflect on that.